Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of She Means Business. First of all, before I even get into this episode, I just want to say a huge thank you to whoever left a few comments on my last video. It really pushed me and motivated me to record this episode. I know I've been a bit inconsistent over the last year when I started the podcast, and I wanted to film it quite consistently, but as you know, there were lots of things that were happening with me, my business, and so on. So I wasn't able to really dedicate the time, but I am definitely going to now, especially after seeing your feedback and your support and how much you're learning from the podcast. So I'm really excited to continue to put valuable content out there. And if you are following me, please do leave a comment and also message me on Instagram. And I'd love to hear your feedback or what you'd want to hear from future episodes. But without further ado, I'm going to get started on this episode. So, this episode is particularly for those of you that are thinking of starting their agency in the near future. I wanted to discuss, a couple of the things that, you might not find on the internet, or perhaps you might just not find easily available on the key things that you should be aware of when entering the agency world. So I kind of want to make this video to kind of point out some of the key things that you might not find online, but you should keep in mind if you are thinking of starting your agency like me. So I mean, I have a marketing agencies, but I have friends that have, financial agencies. I have friends that have real estate agencies. There are just like so many different types of agencies out there, but I kind of just want to walk you through, some of the key things that I've come across over the past 2 years of running Chic Studio. Now, from the outside, it might seem like super glamorous that you can have all of these amazing things as an agency owner. You have amazing clients, you can travel loads to meet your clients, maybe freedom, financial freedom. Eventually, you'll get there, and also just flexibility of time. I guess that's like a really big thing, and obviously, you get a lot of big wins if you put in the work. But although this may seem super glamorous from the outside, there actually is a lot of work that has to be put in to achieve such outcomes. And also, that is only half of the time. The other half of the time, we agency owners, we experience extremely difficult challenges, and I want to walk you through them today. And I've written it down. If you guys are wondering, Shika, why do you keep looking down here? It's because I've actually taken the time to write down a couple of things that I was just brainstorming. What are things that people don't talk about in agency life? I mean, you'll see on Instagram and on TikTok lots of people glamorizing that it's so easy to set up a business now, but it's not as easy, and being a business owner isn't for everyone. So choose wisely. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and that no one prepares you for really, is legal matters. So of course, once you're entering the agency world, you will have to set up your business license. And you also have to set up a bunch of other things, which include your corporate tax, your VAT license, if you are in the UAE, setting up the company properly, whether it's free zone, whether it's inland. These are things that you have to find out. Do you need to have an Emirati stakeholder or shareholder, within your business? These are all things that you need to figure out. And there are very hefty fines in the UAE. I know that if you don't set up your corporate tax, and don't quote me on this because I don't know if it's changed at all, but if you don't sign up for your corporate tax within 3 months of incorporating your company, you can face up to 10,000 dirhams fine. And that was when I was back in the UAE earlier in the year. I don't know if this has changed at all, but definitely check that out. Another thing that you want to ensure if you're an agency, obviously you'll be working with loads of different clients, but how do you know what clauses you should have within your contract? If you've started this business and you're kind of like learning it as you go, no one really tells you, okay, you have to add this clause for late payments, or this clause for content copywriting. So there are lots of different clauses that I kind of learned as I grew my company. Some of the key ones that I've written down here is copywriting clause. So, if we create any content for a brand, who gets the ownership rights of that content? There's some times where we do social media work or photography work, and we have to hand over the rights of that photography to the client. And in some cases, if you want to use if you want to use the content, you have to ask permission from the client, but you're the one that made it, so it gets a bit complicated. And you kind of have to decide, do you want to give them ownership and at what cost? So we kind of sell the rights of the content to our client because they're paying us a fee for that. But I don't really deal too much with that because we do mainly performance marketing, which is your paid ads here at Cheek Studio. So one of the key things that I've actually written down here, which is a clause that I had to implement quite early on, is late payment clauses. So when the client actually pays us, especially since we're running really high budget advertising, we need to be paid at a certain time of the month so that we're able to load up the ad accounts and make sure that we have enough funds for every campaign. And, when you're just starting off and, I started off working with pretty big companies already, you kind of had to have enough cash flow in your bank to support those payments. And, your team might not understand all of these things, as well as bank fees and other things that you have as a cost. But these are things that you as a business owner have to keep in mind. Do I have enough cash in the bank to support these ad payments? Do I have, the right clauses in place so that if the client doesn't pay me by this date, I'm still able to pay, the ad platforms, and I could charge them this fee, or whatever fees you're facing, you would pass it over to them. There are lots of clauses that happen. I am very cautious with that, and I make sure that I have all of these fees for late payments or dates of when they have to pay me by is all written, and I still refine these clauses. But those are kind of like the two main clauses that I have in my contract, because I've faced lots of issues with them. And that, if you're interested, let me know. I can do a whole story time on that. But I faced lots of issues within the UAE as well with late payments, so I can kind of expand on that. But essentially, you kind of learn as you go as a business owner. You don't really have any guidelines, and you kind of have to refine it. Unless you have a mentor, that's great for you, and you can get their support, so you don't have to make these mistakes that I did. Unfortunately, I didn't have someone within the agency space mentoring me or guiding me. I kind of learned everything as I went on. Another last thing that I kind of want to mention regarding legal matters is to clarify your scope with your client, whether it's time based, of like, I'm going to only be consulting you for 5 hours a week. Make that very clear. If you're contracted to work on, let's say, advertising on Meta and Google, and TikTok's not included, they can't ask you to do TikTok as well. You kind of have to have very specific guidelines within your scope, so that doesn't come and bite you in the butt later. So that's something to keep in mind. But overall, you kind of have to learn as you go, like I mentioned before. The next point that I kind of want to kind of point out and discuss a little bit over is, what happens when you're faced with a legal matter and a legal challenge. As business owners, we are actually meant to fight these legal battles, which is quite unfortunate, and it is quite expensive. So, the only issue that I've kind of had, and I want to be real with you guys and share this story, is I've had an issue with late payment before. I've had times where clients completely ghost me and my team after we've delivered the work, and they've, essentially just taken advantage of our company, even though they've signed the contract and everything. And I've, worked with different I guess lawyers. Some I've worked with some companies that are more in charge of just following up and chasing the client for payment. How so like dispute resolution and payment resolution agencies versus I've worked with lawyers in house in the UAE that specifically resolve civil matters and legal matters within the B2B space. So recently, I had a client that didn't pay me for, close to like 8 months. And it was quite a large amount. And I was kind of confused because I didn't have any contacts, within the UAE. Thankfully, I was able to network and find someone to help me, but it was extremely difficult, and eventually they were able to file a case and get the money back from me. But this was a challenge that had a lot of stress on my shoulders, which I don't know if my team knew at the time that it was stressing me out quite a bit. I also obviously had lots of other, I was just at that moment I was kind of like helpless. I felt like I didn't know what to do, and I kind of had to just move on. But how do you move on when you don't have a solution and you can't expect there to be a solution the next time? I think it's better to stop in your tracks and figure out the solution so that if it happens again, you're able to solve the problem right away. So I had to deal with that, and I'm glad I did. But there are lots of, fines and different other legal costs that are involved in the agency world. So something to keep in mind if you are thinking about it. And yeah, regarding, since we're on the topic of payments, I wanted to speak to you about kind of like the cash flow within a business. Now you're gonna, face lots of, I guess, points within your career where you kind of have to have a backup reserve of cash flow. Like, let's say, your business, you have 2 to 3 really big clients that are kind of generating the most amount of revenue for your business. What happens if one day one or two of them decide to leave, and suddenly you're scrambling all over again to get new clients and pay your team and everything like that? But that whole thing takes some time and takes a period of time. Sometimes it takes you quite a few months before you're able to find a really high paying client again, especially if you're starting off. So then how do you deal with not letting go of your employees or anything like that? It's important to have a cash flow and make sure that the team is involved. I feel like my team is very heavily involved in the process of proposal pitching, and just speaking to clients, so they are aware of kind of like how things are going and they know how important client retention is. So I think that goes on to talk to you about how cash flow really affects team morale. You can suddenly see, this summer, and it's something that happens with every business, is you have clients that churn. So how does that client churning really affect your team's morale? That's something that you have to consider as a business owner as well. Make sure you have the, different sort of cushions, like cash flow cushions in place, so that it doesn't come to a point where you then have to discuss, who do I let go from the team and so on. And this, I guess, moves me on to talk to you about, as a business owner, how does bad financial moments really affect you as a business owner? Yes, your team is involved and their team morale is super important to keep up and keep high. But as a business owner, I've specifically faced a lot of stress, a lot of, concern. I sometimes question, would it be easier for me to really just get a 9 to 5 job, rather than dealing with all of this? But there's some things that I've had to learn to detach myself from, which is actually my self-worth from the revenue number. I kind of have to detach my business from who I am as an individual. Because, you know, as a, let's say, solopreneur or a freelancer, I was very, very, very attached to my business. And sometimes and I used to kind of look at my numbers on a month to month basis as a freelancer, which I don't know if other freelancers do the same. But because I had bills to pay and everything like that, I had to make sure that, okay, I am earning at least this much to cover my costs. And as a business owner, as you're building it, past a year, 2 years, you kind of have to detach yourself from the revenue number. And my accountants have told me, and also my husband, who's very good at finance, he's also told me that you should be looking at things from more an annual perspective, because it is a business. You are drawing a salary as well. So that's kind of like a switch that I've had to make mentally, and let it not affect me, because as soon as it affects me, I know it's going to affect my team. If I'm feeling upset and stressed that why isn't this deal closing, or how do the forecasted numbers look like, I feel like if I put too much pressure on that side of things, things will just crumble apart. So that's kind of like a process that I've had to deal with. And yeah, so let's move on to point number 4. I want to speak to you about team problems and company culture. So I never thought I would say this, but managing a team can actually be more difficult than managing your clients. You need to keep in mind, happiness. How happy is your team actually doing the work? Are they satisfied with their role? I recently, because my teams now, I have around 6 full-time employees now within my company. I've had to start to implement these surveys, and it's not something I've had to do. I want to do it. I want to understand how is my team liking the company culture as we're growing, as we're hiring more people. Are they finding it kind of that they're working towards a bigger mission? Are they feeling that they're working towards a company mission? And are they motivated and excited to come to work every day? Because if you have happy employees, then you will have a happy and successful business, right? And also, because we work remotely, I feel like it's really hard to have a really strong company culture. But I've had to implement, these calls with my team, making sure that they are working towards a collective mission, making sure that they all are understanding exactly what each other is doing. So once my team logs in, because they work in a different time zone to me currently, they all say good morning to each other, and they all know what their tasks is. We keep that in mind on Asana, so that everybody knows, okay, this person's working on this, and I need to deliver this by this date. At the end of the day, everybody kind of like writes on the group chat, this is what I've worked on, this is what's pending. So at least for me, when I'm in this time zone, I'm like behind them in terms of hours. I end up working actually until sunset. So I work in the morning. As soon as I wake up, I start work at around 6, and then my team kind of logs off at around like 11 a.m. And then I continue working until 1, and then I have my lunch break for like an hour or two, and then I get back straight into work and focus on other things. Obviously, my team is probably not aware of maybe 50% of the other things that I'm working on, which are more, business development related and growing the company as a whole, speaking to different leads and things like that. And also just looking at the company projections. So these are all things that I feel like I want to involve them more on, and I eventually will involve them more on. And I know bigger corporate companies do already have that, team days, quarterly team review meetings, all of that. So these are all things that I feel like we'll implement as we go. But yeah, another thing I guess is employee churn. So understanding that an employee will not, unfortunately, stay with you until the very end. It's just common, right? Like people will stay in a company for a certain amount of years if they are happy, which is important for you as a business owner to keep them happy. but eventually, because of certain circumstances, that employee will eventually leave. So you need to have that mental peace or mental, I guess, clarity that it's not personal and it's something that just happens in every business, and you have to just detach yourself from it. So there are lots of things, I guess, you have to detach yourself from as a business owner. But since we're on the topic, hiring is actually the toughest part about my job as a business owner, because time and time again, I've hired people that have amazing, outstanding, and superb CVs. However, it doesn't reflect in the work when they join. So they overpromise and underdeliver. So, there are times and times where I've had to, within a 3 month, within their probation period, that's the time where I've learned that I have to decide, am I keeping this person or am I firing them? And within that 3 months, I'm very, very, very strict in terms of, how are they performing? Are they taking feedback well? Are they kind of like very, very, very nice and work gelling well with the rest of their team? These are all things that I want to keep in mind. And the most important thing is, are they proactive? Because I simply love employees that are proactive. I don't have to kind of micromanage them and see what they're doing all the time. I want them to be proactive with clients, with me, with the rest of their team, because it's very hard as a remote business to ensure that your employees are actually working. Like, they could be working only half the day and not working the other half of the day. How are you supposed to know that? It's not like you have cameras all around their house to check. So I think trust is also a huge thing. So um, I've kind of learned, and I've kind of had to get over the emotional toll over hiring. And as you get, I guess, bigger as a business, you're able to delegate that, obviously, if you have a HR team and all of that. But yeah, essentially, hiring can be super challenging. So if you are able to delegate that and then just do the final interviews, I would say that's definitely something you should keep in mind. And speaking of, employees, the other side of the thing is unhappy clients. So how do you deal with unhappy clients, and how do you not let that not affect you? Within every single business, it is very natural and very common that at some point you will have a client that is not happy with you. You guys do not gel at all, and you are the wrong fit for each other, and you will part ways. There's no denying that, and that will eventually happen. Not everybody, same as in the real world, not everybody will be friends. So, I mean, I want to talk about maybe an example that might help you. I would say within the first year of my business, we had no churn and everybody was quite satisfied with our services. But as we got bigger and we grew really rapidly, and I didn't have, maybe the right number of team members on a project or everything like that, and a client that I had wasn't happy with the service. And, that was my fault. I will take the blame on it, even though I shouldn't, because, sometimes I have to learn to detach myself from certain things. But anyways, this client was unhappy and they decided to part ways with us, which I was completely fine with. I obviously beat myself up on it because it was our first client that let us go, and it was because my team had made a mistake. So I just had to apologize and kind of like let go and part ways. And that was a learning experience for me. I had to learn that I'd rather have more staff than less staff on a project. And I need to have available freelancers on the side at any point in case I need them. So I've kind of learned from that experience, and now I have all of the resources available to tap into if I do have certain amazing projects that come up and my team is quite swamped. I will hire those freelancers or those employees to take care of those projects. But I guess certain things that I've learned is, have these contacts in place. Another thing I've learned is learning to over communicate with your clients. So, sharing things for approval time and time again, and making sure that you get the approval for them. For whatever you're putting out, whether it's social content, ads, whatever it is, ensuring that your client has written confirmation and has approved it. That is super important, because we've had instances where a client has approved things on call perhaps, but when it's gone out, they're like, oh, why did you post that? And we're like, oh, you had actually approved it last week. So I think having and learning that you need to over communicate and get everything approved on email or on chat, that's super important as well. And learning to set boundaries early. So I've had super crazy clients in the past where they call me on weekends, or they call me when I'm enjoying my day off, or messaging me, or demanding answers immediately, or pressuring me as the business owner to work on certain campaigns when that is clearly not my job. I believe, like, when I had started my company, I was still of the freelancer mindset where I wanted to be involved in every single project. And that is because, I loved doing my work. But as I've grown my team, I've delegated a lot of the work that I have, and I still do keep an eye on every single thing and have calls with my team every single week. I check on every project myself. I'm involved in every group chat, but I just am there to make sure that everything is working fine. But that doesn't mean that I need to be actively involved in developing the campaigns, which are also quite time heavy, right? They take a lot of time to build these campaigns. So if I were to take all of my time doing all of my clients' work, I would have no time to actually grow my business. So I feel like that's something that I needed to realize, which I realized, probably quite early on. I would say 6 months into my business, I was like, okay, I need to delegate this. But I feel like that's been a learning curve for my clients to understand. But setting those boundaries earlier on, so as soon as I've onboarded clients, I clearly tell them I'm basically going to be only looking after strategy and making sure that your KPIs are being met, and we're making sure that we're reaching, whatever goal we've set together. But that's about it. And then my team is very capable and very talented enough to then actually execute this. So setting those boundaries early on will help you a lot. And to kind of like wrap up this podcast, I kind of want to tell you that as a business owner, you will have many moments where you'd want to give up. You would miss the stability of a 9 to 5 job. You will miss the stability of just, having your work between Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. As a business owner, however, you will have instances where you'll have to work on the weekends, just like how I'm doing. I have a couple of things that I have to like wrap up, and I will, have to work, on the weekends, and sometimes in the evenings of some weekdays. So these are things that you kind of just have to be okay with as a business owner. And I do miss having my weekends to just relax, but it's okay. And I would say another key thing is that I've had to learn to not put the blame all on myself for everything that goes wrong. I know I had just told you maybe like 10 minutes ago that I blame myself for the client thing that went wrong. But, that's something that I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to adjust and understand that sometimes not everything that happens in my business is my fault. And I just have to learn and be okay with that, and kind of being excited and keeping and giving good feedback to my team if they have made the mistake, and also pushing through every single time and hoping things will get better. So there are lots of bumps on the road of an agency life, as you can see. And your agency will honestly only grow as fast as you do. So that's kind of something that I've learned, and I've had to put in a lot of work. I absolutely hate burnout culture now after burning myself out time and time again. And I also really value work life balance. So, and that's something I preach with my employees as well. I make sure that they're not working more than they need to. Um, so, I guess some tips for you if you're starting your agency life. I hope all of these tips have helped you. But one thing that I would tell you is that you need to be in with what's trending right now. So, if AI and automation is trending right now, you need to learn and absorb and grow as the world is growing. That's how you're going to find innovative ideas and keep yourself and your team on your toes. Another thing is you should hire people that are obviously smarter than you to be able to grow your company to the next level. And don't be afraid to delegate, because that is the only thing that's going to take your business forward, especially so that you have time for the bigger things like business development and growing and scaling. Um, and agency success is categorized into three things that will push your agency forward and towards that dream goal that you have in mind. And those three things are resilience, leadership, and learning as you go. So I hope you can build yourself after learning all of these amazing things that I have told you. I've probably missed a couple of things that maybe other agency owners are facing. So if you have anything else to add to the list that I presented to you today, let me know in the comment section below. And yeah, I'm excited to continue posting more podcasts soon. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please leave a thumbs up and a comment down below. And please follow Chic Studio Marketing on Instagram if you haven't already. And follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And I hope I can build a community that is seriously inspired and is learning and is wanting to edge towards success as much as I am. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.